James Lindsay, notable for the Sokol Squared hoax, where he, along with Helen Pluckrose and Peter Boghossian, got many academic journals to publish insane nonsense. We recently saw a story about a woman who got her doctorate after claiming that fictional smells in books are examples of racism, classism, sexism, and species-based oppression. And of course, for this, I have announced that anybody who becomes a member at timcast.com for at least $25 will get an honorary doctorate in whatever they want. And you can call yourself doctor, because that's your qualification now. If you can write a thesis where you're like, the description of smells in books is racist, and that makes you a doctor, being a doctor ain't worth all that much. So how about skip the line and $25? But anyway, my friends, we have a new hoax. Two of them, actually. This is James Lindsay's new discourses, where a story has been going viral. Yesterday, he published the story, A Communist Manifesto for Christian Nationalists Testing the Woke Right. The woke right is not really a thing. Woke is easily defined, in my opinion, though there are many people with differing understandings of it. I would say that I'm correct, and perhaps I'm not, but I think my assessment on the definition of woke is more correct than others, because I don't believe that these other individuals who have tried to define it have taken a holistic view of what woke is and why things are described as woke. So before I describe woke and my definition of it, I will first say this. There is no woke right. This is not a real hoax that James Lindsay did. And I'm extremely disappointed in many of these former liberals who are dancing around and acting like something big has been done in the face of a non-existent threat that has little to no merit or weight in politics. That is the idea of Christian nationalists as some kind of grand institution that we should fear or worry about. Let me put it this way. Let me start here. James Lindsay writes this article, A Communist Manifesto for Christian Nationalists, and this is a magazine called The American Reformer. James Lindsay asserts that he tricked a right-wing publication, a Christian nationalist publication, into publishing the Communist Manifesto. Wow. Well, certainly that will discredit Christian nationalists and the right. Except it doesn't, because he didn't really publish the Communist Manifesto. He just used the rhetorical structure of it with a completely inverted ideology. That is, if you actually compare the text of what he got published in this limited to no notoriety right-wing publication, no offense, guys, but like, it's not a big publication. It's just a different thing. And it's not real. Now, I'll tell you, as we break down the story, the main point of this segment is what I see right now are many people who used to be liberal, or they're still liberal. I don't want to say they used to be, but they're liberals. And because the left has started calling everybody conservative, these people have been shocked to their core. Heavens me, they might call me right wing. I can't live for that. So I find right wing criticism. This is called moral cowardice, fear, and it is pathetic. Basically, out of fear of what other people might say about them, they're desperately trying to find a right-wing specter so that they can claim they're still liberals and they still challenge the right. It's cringe. And I'm going to call out these individuals directly, and feel free to respond. And I will say, I believe it's ignorant. I believe it's dishonest. And I believe if you want to make a point about the woke right, it would be you, good sir, James Lindsay, Colin Wright, and Konstantin Kysin, who are the woke right. And I will explain. Stressing again, the core of their argument is that James Lindsay tricked a right-wing publication into publishing the general structure of Karl Marx's argument in the Communist Manifesto. Thus, the method is the same. Therefore, if the woke uses a certain dialectic and method for delivery, and they tricked the right into doing it, albeit with a different ideology, it's thus the same thing. Wrong! And pathetic. Konstantin Kysin of the Trigonometry podcasts responded to James Lindsay's tweet saying, LOL, woke right must be mad. James repeated the hoax when he and colleagues got woke magazines to publish sections of Mein Kampf, but this time he got a woke right magazine to publish sections of the Communist Manifesto. LOL. LOL indeed. And then you have Colin Wright saying James Lindsay has hoaxed a leading Christian nationalist woke right publication into publishing sections of the Communist Manifesto. His pen name was Marcus Carlson. Karl Marx, anyone? Laughing emoji. Well, here's the reality. He didn't. OK, so Mike Cernovich responded to the quote unquote hoax, which I'll dive into in a second before we get through the social element, saying here was my response. I said the Sokal Squared hoax targeted mainstream academia. So for those not familiar with Sokal Squared, this is a big deal. And credit to James Lindsay, Helen Pluckrose, and Peter Boghossian for having pulled it off. Convincing prominent left-wing academic journals to publish sections of Mein Kampf, but restructured as feminist literature. One of the articles was the conceptual penis and how it's an idea. I mean, it's patriarchy. It was absurd. And another was about patriarchy at the dog park or something. These were patently absurd and deserving of mockery, but they somehow ended up in prominent journals that academia would give credit to. That is a massive multi-billion-dollar international institution with egg on its face. I think that's a big deal. But of course, these are individual journals and they all have their editorial standards, I suppose. I responded with the Sokal Squared hoax, which is what it was called, targeted mainstream academia. This is just some right-wing publication of limited social weight, so it's okay, I guess. But it's kind of cringe to act like it's this big own. To which Mike Cernovich responded. It's even worse. James isn't being honest. He rewrote the passages as red lines demonstrate. When confronted with this evidence, he retreated to a new claim, namely the methods are the same. Maybe, but that's not what his initial headline said. Totally dishonest. That's right. So let me tell you what my takeaway is here before we start to break everything down, and I'll explain to you woke and all that stuff. I see in these individuals like Konstantin Kaisin, and you guys feel free to comment and correct me if I'm wrong. I see men who defied social orthodoxy of the left, wokeness. I can elaborate that in a little bit. And we're facing cultural ramifications of this. Now, me personally, I've faced cultural ramifications. I've been smeared, lied about. Not as bad as many others, but I really don't care. Because I'm the kind of guy who would be just fine living in a van down by the river. But for these individuals, James Lindsay, not a conservative guy, obviously. He's an atheist, I'm pretty sure. And I don't know that Constantine and Conrad, I don't know if they're atheists or Christians or Gnostic or whatever you want to call it. But these are individuals who I feel have exemplified their fear of being called conservative. Notably, Konstantin Kaisin on his X profile literally has politically non-binary satirist listed there. I don't put liberal, disaffected liberal, post-liberal. I think that's fine to say. I think it's fine to assert my political views, but people call me right-wing conservative all the time, and I get it. I'm not trying to go out of my way to attack the right, to try and justify why I'm not conservative. I will sit here with conservatives and say, I completely understand your point on Christian morals and disagree on theocracy, but that's an interesting point about God. We've had conversations about the Ten Commandments and how I feel that they are good logic and moral structures regardless of your religion. Yes, even do not have any gods before me, despite the fact I'm not a Christian and do not believe any of the Bible or the Christian teachings. And nor do I agree with Christian nationalists. I have no problem with someone saying, aha, Tim, that makes you right wing. I say, okay, well, I'm not. And any conservative would tell me I'm not, but I don't need to put it in my profile that I'm non-binary or whatever, politically non-binary. But to be fair, okay, I'll eat that one. I think my profile might say disaffected liberal. It might not. I don't know what it says. It doesn't. Okay. Yeah. It's host Timcast IRL. It's, and I don't even know. I mean, maybe, but I'll say like, I have no problem asserting that I am a thing. And I'll give that one to Constantine. But I genuinely believe that you have these people who, James Lindsay, and I will give a shout out to Shoe on Head. I'm sorry, Shoe, but you deserve some of this too. Shoe on Head was like a liberal, progressive. You may be familiar with her YouTube channel. And she was friends with Lauren Southern. At some point, because Lauren Southern was called alt-right or whatever, Shuan had released a statement saying like, oh, I can't be involved with this. And it's just cringe, dude. It's just cringe, man. My friends are my friends, okay? I'm not fans of people who are overtly racist and bigot and all that stuff. I'm not going to hang out with them, okay? But to throw a friend like that under the bus, Lauren Southern is not a white nationalist. This is ridiculous, okay? This is what I see in these people complaining about woke right to the point where acting like some random magazine publishing your altered version of portions of, not even actually the Communist Manifesto, is some kind of massive own. Okay, so let's start here. Excuse me. James Lindsay points out that it's all dishonest. Okay, well, this is the article that James Lindsay wrote. The red is what was changed. So you may notice that 86% of the article was rewritten. Okay, so it's not actually convincing them to publish the Communist Manifesto. As some have, I think I have, here's Jim Hansen. Let's do this. He says, James Lindsay is mocking the woke right for publishing 6 pages of the Communist Manifesto. I've read Marx and I may not have recognized his edited version. Judge for yourself. The red shows the edits he made. I have no dog in this fight, but you ought to play straight. Yeah. So here's where, Jim points out that it's a dramatically altered article. Well, my understanding is that James Lindsay initially stated he used the first 6 pages and got them to publish it, which he did not do. He used Marx's rhetorical structure and then put in his own morals. I think I have Harrison Smith, who responded saying, you completely changed the subjects being discussed and so inverted the message. It's like replacing the word God with Satan in the Bible and saying it's proof Christians are Satanists. No, a rose by any of their name, right? Still be a rose. And so that's the point. If James Lindsay has discovered that elements of the right are collectivist with a moral ideology, I'm shocked to find that out because, in fact, like every single tribal group structure is structured this way in the belief that their moral structure is better than others. And I think it's plain to see that even the disaffected liberal cohort of which I and these other individuals are a part of, we are all liberal-minded individuals have a great deal of reverence for Enlightenment principles and classical liberalism. Many of us, we may disagree with elements of the right, but we're all going to be called right-wing because of our moral structures, which agree with people on the right. There's nothing you can do about it. But these people are terrified of being called that. So I can give you an example. We'll break down what wokeness is. I know. I'm just trying to say a lot, right? One person responded, the X post on the article has 12 likes after almost 2 weeks. How are they relevant again? Everything under the sun is out there. Every demon, every ideology, every sin. Most of it can be ignored. Some of it can't be. Knowing what dragons are the current threat outweighs the ones that might come later. Yes, you need someone that can see them before they come, but also need to fight. You can't fight windmills. Can the religious right become the Spanish Inquisition again? Sure, but not anytime soon. The institutional stranglehold the woke left had needs to be rooted out first, and I would prefer that no kind of power take over. If we allow any authoritarian structures to survive, I'm 1,000 more times more worried about Islamic right that will take it instead of the Christian right. All right. So here's what James Lindsay writes. He says, as many of you know and fewer appreciate, I have been aiming to expose a phenomenon called the woke right for some time now. It's a nonsense term. I don't think it applies. But if you were going to apply it to anything, I would say it applies to James Lindsay in that he is a leftist. He is a liberal, not like a staunch leftist socialist, but he is of the left. And he is the right element of it, meaning he's counter to many of their opinions. He disagrees with much of their ideology, but he is still very much on the left. That would be, in my opinion, the woke right, especially when you use dishonest and smarmy takes to try and malign people who have no real public relevance. That's a tactic of wokeness, the adherence to social orthodoxy on the liberal side. That's what it is. I got to break it down. I got my big definition, but we'll try to get through this. And I need to read what he says because I think he makes a terrible point. He says, this whole matter is an issue of considerable and rather fierce debate. Is woke the right term for them? Are they really right? Should we call them something else? Is it really even happening? Does it even matter? Is this even important? Each of these is worthy enough question and matter for its own debate, but regarding the question of whether woke is the right term for them, I haven't been fully convinced despite my heavy use of the term. As you'll see momentarily, I'm now far more convinced. So far, I've attempted in various arenas to explain why I think the term woke right fits and to identify some examples. And I've done a couple of podcasts explaining the phenomenon and making the case more fully. I've also done a number of interviews. Still, it remains an open question. Are they really woke? So I decided to do a little experiment, a throwback to an earlier James, if you will. And as it happens, we are so back. No, you're not. Targeting a massive institution of absurdity and psychosis is not the same as going after a minor publication because they have collectivist ideas. That's stupid. There's a whole bunch of collectivist organizations out there, and I'm not going to go to a group of snake charmers and be like, the snake charmers are woke. Nobody cares about snake charmers. They have no public relevance. They got flat earthers have more followers than these guys. If we're going to talk about the dangers of anti-science woke elements, let's complain about flat earthers and geocentrists who can have upwards of hundreds of thousands of followers. And yet these guys on the Christian nationalist side, this magazine you targeted, no offense, guys, I know some of them follow me, but they got like 5,000 followers, dude. Anyway, we are not so back. There are crazy people that exist in various ideologies. And I tried bringing this up to James, Peter, and Helen way back when I interviewed them. They claim that wokeness, intersectionality, critical theory emerges from the universities. And I said, that's not true. They did grow in these universities, but it's not the universities themselves that are causing these issues, because these ideas have always existed. And they've always existed in universities. And more importantly, numerous other ideologies exist in these universities, and they did not rise to prominence. There are a plethora, nay, infinite possibilities in ideology that you don't know or care about, namely snake charmers. We don't see them rising up and taking power. The issue was structured in social media trends. That's why LexisNexis data showed all across the world, with the emergence of social media, certain ideas rose to the forefront. And it was because of advertiser pressure, algorithms, with a mix of a little bit of liberal ideas. It all came together and it turned into the psychotic mess. But wokeness is not just communism or critical theory, which I will explain. He says, to put the conclusion out before I explain myself, I figured a good way to test the woke right for wokeness would be to submit a little hoax essay to what I presume is their flagship publication, American Reformer. To produce this woke right hoax, I took a couple thousand words straight out of the Manifesto of the Communist Party by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, better known as the Communist Manifesto, and lightly modified it into a woke right critique of liberalism, which the so-called woke right hate. They published it, the liberal consensus. He says, I figure there's nothing more definitively woke than the Communist Manifesto, so I think we can drop with the inverted commas here and get on with calling them woke right after this. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Karl Marx and the Communist Manifesto. Let me tell you, first and foremost, would anybody call me woke? Honest question. Do you think I'm woke? Comment below. Most people are going to say, no, Tim's extremely anti-woke and criticizes all of their garbage. But hey, hold on. I have long advocated for addressing class-based politics that largely overlap with, dare I say, the Communist Manifesto. What's that? Tim's a liberal? Uh-oh. Yeah, I think there are serious issues related to powerful individuals who can wield a disproportionate amount of power through class against the working class. I am a liberal-leaning populist in this regard with some libertarian tendencies, but I do believe in government regulation. And I don't think Karl Marx is just the idea that Karl Marx could criticize liberalism and then use this dialectic and this rhetorical structure where he's basically like, here are the things that are bad, and they've risen up and they've created this element, and now our side and our moral structure is better. The idea that a group may defy one other group in such a way, I don't think makes you woke, okay? It's silly to be like the Communist Manifesto is definitively woke. That is derivative, simplistic, and I think it shows that James Lindsay has not actually addressed the issue of what wokeness is. Let's start here. You may ask me, Tim, what is woke? Think about it for a second. Recently, Jaguar, as the British presenter called it, Jaguar, came out with these ridiculous cars in a cringe commercial where you had a bunch of different people of various racial backgrounds and genders wearing ridiculous clothing in a ridiculous set. And it was called woke by a lot of people. Why? Well, the color scheme they used are the transgender color schemes, the baby blue and the salmon pink or whatever it's called. And the individuals did look strange, often in alignment with how people would perceive non-binary or trans or whatever. That's probably why people called it woke, despite the fact that there's nothing overtly political about it. It was just weird postmodernist art. Copy nothing. And people looked weird. So I don't necessarily think that was woke in my opinion, but a lot of people did think it was woke. And I think it's fair to say that I understand why on the surface it would appear as such. Wokeness, in my view, can be easily described as cult-like adherence to liberal social orthodoxy. And that's why we say a video game that recently Dragon Age comes out, and there's a character who is like, oh no, I misgendered you. I better do push-ups. It's called pulling above. And we're like, that's woke. What's woke about it? It's not that someone was gay. There's gays against groomers. There are gay people who are anti-woke. There are trans people who are anti-woke. So it's not that it was trans. What was it? It was the cult-like adherence to social orthodoxy. Nobody's going to really care if in a game you can, like, look at Baldur's Gate. In Baldur's Gate, nobody said, this game is too woke for me, despite the fact you can make male characters with female pronouns. It wasn't ham-fisted and forced. It was an option, and people went, I guess it's kind of woke to have that in there because it's a weird element of this critical intersectional theory. But typically, things are called woke when they reach a level of cult-like adherence to social orthodoxy. I will stress that again. In Baldur's Gate 3, which came out last year and was like the best game released in a long time, epic game, by the way, you can make a male character and give them a female voice and female pronouns. You, in fact, could make a male character. Well, I don't know if you call him male, but you could make a male, you could take a male body type, they'd called it, and give it female parts. And there was no decrying the game as overly woke. There was no big campaign. People weren't complaining because although those elements of trans and gender ideology existed within it, and we can say those are a component of wokeness to a certain degree, it wasn't forced into the game where they did this weird thing where like, I better do push-ups because I accidentally misgendered somebody. So here's why I say this is what woke means. It's because when you hear Ben Shapiro talk about something that is woke, when you take a look at Bud Light making Dylan Mulvaney this character, it is the injection of an unpopular ideology in an effort to look like you align with liberal social orthodoxy. We typically refer to that as wokeness. If someone said something like me personally, I've said, yeah, I'll use pronouns. I've not been called woke for that. I don't get accused of being woke because we had a drag queen on the culture war and I said, you know, I'll be respectful, I'll use your pronouns. And then I say she, her for what is obviously a male person. Conservatives disagree, but they wouldn't call me woke. Why? Because I'm not going to lie to bend the knee in an effort to adhere to some idea of what it means to be a liberal so I can align with what liberals are supposed to be. The cult-like adherence to liberal social orthodoxy. That's why I say James Lindsay, Constantine Colin Wright, I would describe as woke right, if there was a woke right. They're individuals that desperately want to be called liberals to the point where they're attacking the non-existent specter of some Christian nationalist group, which doesn't really exist. Look, I get it. A magazine exists. But if they came out, like I said, went after snake charmers, people would be like, y'all are weird. But because they're people who were liberal and are terrified of being called conservative and desperately want to adhere to some liberal social order, they are the right hand of the left. Let me read more. So I'll stress this too. While no one's going to call me woke, I don't completely disagree with Karl Marx. I think critical theory in the class sense is not entirely wrong. I think his solutions are insane and you need more market solutions. This idea of to each according to their need makes no sense. But this idea that, let me put it this way. If I build up an industry to the point where if I work 1 hour, I make $100,000. That's a disproportionate amount of power that can disrupt the lives of working people in an extremely negative way. And these are challenges that we face. They do exist. I have a critique of that. I am a fan of collective bargaining against employers. I'm fairly liberal in that regard. Steve Bannon, I agree with him when he says, tax these rich people. They're exploiting us. Look at the ultra wealthy dumping money into politics to subvert the will of the people. Look at what Matt Gaetz had to do with Kevin McCarthy and his $1 billion IOU scheme. It's not all wrong to criticize power structures. But anyway, I digress. No one's going to call me right wing. But I again, fair point. I don't largely agree with Marx. He goes on to say, they published Karl Marx's definitive communist work dressed up to resemble their own pompous, self-pitying drivel when it was submitted from a completely unknown author with no internet footprint whatsoever bearing the name Marcus Carlson. Get it? Yeah, which proves you targeted low-hanging fruit with a lean staff, no money, and no editorial standards. No disrespect to the American former, but you guys, you're not very big. So congratulations on the success you've had. But all he's basically saying is he went to a blog and he convinced them to publish an ideological manifesto of Christian nationalism that they agreed with. What is there? He goes on to say that question answered raises the deeper second question above, which I will not address here, about if they're really on the right as they consistently claim they are. Yeah, why not? They're traditionalists. From then on this, I'll only say I've been using the term right hand of the left, which I think is James Lindsay because he's a leftist, but he functions as a counter. So again, I'll stress these individuals who I have named, and there's many more, are basically liberals who are to the right of the woke, but are still desperately trying to adhere to a liberal social orthodoxy. They just don't like what the social orthodoxy has turned into. Now, what we are seeing following the election of Donald Trump is many of these woke people who are like Orange Man bad, Trump's a fascist, trans kids, all that, are having this come to Jesus moment, and I mean that figuratively, where now they're like, the Democrats lied to us the whole time. I'm a true liberal. This is what I see from these people. They're trying so desperately to reclaim what it means to be liberal orthodoxy that they are woke in their own different way. Dishonest tactics, manipulation, all for the purpose of some kind of political gain. He goes on to say, I started taking the preamble and then just short of 6 continuous pages of text from the first chapter of the Communist Manifesto. This chapter is titled Bourgeoisie and Proletarians, and it is part of the manifesto where Marx and Engels make the case that the bourgeoisie, middle class, owners, management, and wealthy, as a class is abusive to the proletariat, the workers, as a class in just about every way you could imagine. I then rather crudely swapped out references to the bourgeoisie with something to do with either liberalism, liberals, classical liberalism, and their real and mighty bugbear, the post-war liberal consensus. We call that the liberal economic order. That's actually what they call it in the CFR, which they believe oppresses them. Concurrently, I swapped out references to the proletariat with references to an object they call the new Christian right as a way of referring to themselves. I then massaged some of the specifics for fit, flourish, and flow, cut a bunch of consolidated to fit the word count requirement, attached the document to an email from a made-to-order burner account, and hit send. A few days later, they published it on American Reformer with minimal edits. So far as these terms of art go, meaning post-war liberal consensus and new Christian right, I didn't invent them. I took them from a couple articles published on American Reformer, aiming to describe their own movement, etc., etc. Now, following him being called out for it basically just being a completely different thing, I'll stress this. Let me pull up this here Communist Manifesto. Here's the preamble. A specter is haunting Europe. The specter of communism. All the powers of old Europe have entered into a holy alliance to exorcise this specter. Pope and Tsar, Metternich and Guizot, French radicals and German police spies. Where is the party in opposition that has not been decried as communistic by its opponents in power? Where is the opposition that has not hurled back the branding reproach of communism? Now, what do we have here in this preamble? Nothing. Basically, he's saying the powers that be are bad and we are good. You could literally put anything in there. Conservatives and the woke right are bad and we are good. How about I do this? A specter is haunting America. The specter of liberalism. All the powers of our institutions have entered into a holy alliance to exercise this specter. The Pope and how about I say the executive branch, the independent media sphere, even the police and the military. Where is the party in opposition that has not been decried as liberals or mentally ill by its opponents in power? It's stupid. Insert power. As I've made this point over and over again, if you want to figure out which cult you belong to, just figure out which group you want to blame. So I can certainly say that people who are like the 1% or the Jews or the bankers or the cabal or the CFR, they always want to blame one group for all of the world's problems. And when you do that, you've identified which group you're in. The point is, when you take a look at the Communist Manifesto, you can certainly get through the rhetoric and say, what do we see here? He says that communism is good. He says that the bourgeoisie is oppressing the proletariat. Everybody can and likely will be under the power structures of somebody else. In a conversation I had with Cenk Uygur the other day, he pointed out sometimes you lose the vote. We wouldn't then say the majority oppresses the minority. I mean, you would to a certain degree, but that's why in the United States we have minority representation. Anyway, let's jump down. So basically, my point on this, when Cernovich says that he's not being honest, that's why, again, I say he's woke right. If I were to take what he did, a rising spirit is haunting America, the spirit of a true liberal majority. Moreover, all the existing powers of the American regime since the end of the Second World War have aligned themselves against it and its reemergence in the shadows of American civic life. I could insert anything I want into there. It's stupid. And then to claim that they published the Communist Manifesto is just to say that sometimes people have moral ideologies. Let me break down why I would say that James Lindsay is, when I say that he would be described as right wing, and people like me as well. Take, for example, and this is an understanding of collectivism and moral ideology. Take, for instance, the liberal principles of freedom of choice. And I know I'm being simplistic, but freedom of choice. So let's say that there's an issue in public life that one side, that both sides will cite a principle, but come to different understandings of it. That's the difference in morals versus logic. So the example I like to give is vaccines and transgender surgeries. So the issue is, do individuals have a right to make their own medical decisions for themselves and their families without government intrusion? Yes or no? What we will hear on the left is people have a right to choose their own medical issues. The government should not intervene. My body, my choice, except for vaccines. You better get it if the government tells you. Whoa. Hold on there. That's hypocritical, right? Okay. Well, the left is going to argue that they're basically saying, look, Vaccines are for the greater good. So that one's getting exemption. But then do you really believe that individuals have the right to choose their own medical practices? Now, how about this one? On the right, we come to the inverse with transgender children. I have asked conservatives this. Do individuals have a right to make their own medical decisions for their friends and their family? And should the government intervene in those decisions? And they say no. Aha, but I got you, Tim. Abortion is not about that. They're terminating. When I'm talking about abortion, because I understand there's two lives. It's difficult, right? No, we're talking about trans kids. If a family goes to a doctor and the doctor says your kid should get sterilized and have their genitals removed because they're trans, ask a conservative, should the government intervene and prohibit this treatment and instead prescribe something else? Yes, no question. Yeah, I actually agree with that one. And that's tough to reconcile, right? Because hold on, I thought we agreed that individuals can make those choices without government intervention. No, the government intervenes to prevent some things, so long as our morals align with it and we believe that our logic is correct in justifying those actions. So, who's right and who's wrong? The point I'm making here is that you're going to find moral collectives. That's it. You can structure these conversations however you want, but if I jump back to what James Lindsay wrote and put, a rising spirit is haunting America, the spirit of an anti-transgender movement. Moreover, all the existing powers of the American regime since the end of the 1990s have aligned themselves against it and its emergence. From the shadows of American civic life, politics, and religion, the transgender movement and its neo-Marxist woke descendant or woke components. You see what I did there? I took something that I think was good and I pitted it against something that was bad. That in no way implicates these individuals as woke. It just shows that there's moral collectives. Anyway, going to the bottom, here's what he says. A final question you might be wondering is how tight this hoax is. Well, first, let me just stress again, American Reformer, who are they? Like, to be honest, if you go after mainstream academia and you roast a powerful institution that has injected crackpot ideas and anti-science BS into our mainstream, destroyed businesses, got people fired from their jobs, and reshaped the political landscape to the point where children are getting sterilized, hey man, go after that. That's insane. If a Christian right-wing nationalist group rose up and was smashing windows and firebombing the White House and forcing women to wear bonnets and red gowns, by all means, let's critique it. But this is what I'm talking about with James Lindsay and the rest of this disaffected liberal cohort, terrified of being called conservatives. They have to find a right-wing specter to attack in some way to justify how they're actually liberals the whole time. It's cringe. I'm not going to sit here and dance around and say Christian nationals, this country should be a theocracy or anything like this. But I have no problem sitting down with Christians and saying, here's where I agree with your ideas. I also have no problem sitting down with actual critical theorists and talking about class-based oppression and these issues where I agree with them. Anyway, this is what he compares. A couple of paragraphs that are comparable rhetoric. That's it. Well, the American Reformer put an editor's note. And this is where I'll wrap things up because I could go on with this subject for forever. The following article was written by James Lindsay, who as an avowed atheist, is not eligible for publication in American Reformer. However, Mr. Lindsay originally submitted the article under the name Marcus Carlson. Lindsay used a passage of Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, stripping out its ideological substance, but retaining its powerful rhetorical structure. This was intended as a hoax, but is seemingly poorly conceived. Given the undeniable power of Marx's rhetorical approach, as Lindsay himself acknowledged, while we are unaware of its authorship and motive, it is still a reasonable aggregation of some new right ideas repackaged into Marx's effective rhetoric. And we have corrected its authorship to properly credit Mr. Lindsay. If I were to say that child gender ideology is a dangerous thing and that we should oppose it and there should be the rise of a new anti-gender ideology liberalism, using Marx's rhetorical structure doesn't make me a communist. Saying that powerful structures of government, the woke, have been pushing this ideology and we must rise up to stop it because it is oppressive is not woke. Lying, manipulating, desperately trying to adhere to social orthodoxy, and these are the elements of wokeness. So I will say it again to wrap things up. Blair White is a transgender person. Nobody calls Blair White woke. Some people might, but for the most part, they don't. Certainly, there are people on the right who don't like Blair, but Blair is largely accepted by the anti-woke and largely considered to be anti-woke. So if it's not gender ideology that makes something woke, what is it? It is when someone goes on TV and says, Joe Biden's not going to pardon his son. He said it. And then a week later, they're like, well, he should have pardoned his son. It's when they are willing to say whatever they have to say to adhere to a fractured and disparate social orthodoxy, of which critical theory, gender ideology, and race theory are large components. But I tell you this, you could be transgender, literally agree with the right of adults to undergo these procedures to treat gender dysphoria, and the moment you say something like Joe Biden sold out this country, they'll call you right wing. So clearly wokeness more often aligns with a strange social orthodoxy. If you are someone who simply looks on the surface and doesn't seek to investigate what the ideas are behind this, you're going to end up saying something like the Communist Manifesto is woke. Okay, Marx's ideas in critical theory are huge components of social orthodoxy on the left. They largely agree with it. I agree with some elements of it too. I'm rather liberal, but I am not woke because I'm not going to sit here and lie, cheat, or steal to try and maintain these worldviews and be part of some cult. So I digress. I could go on for a lot longer on this one, but I'm not going to. There's a lot more comments that people are making. The story went a bit viral. We had one comment from someone to Mike Cernovich saying, I don't understand why the woke right is so much of a concern. We have way bigger problems, inflation, lawfare, out of control illegal immigration, 2 of the 3 that killed Rome. Mike responded saying, it's small ball, which is why I rarely discuss it. Today was an exception as people lied, and this included some people who I expected integrity from, and will downgrade them in my mental model accordingly. By all means, y'all can say that Carl Benjamin is wrong in his critiques of these things in post-liberalism. That's fine. I'm not saying I know that he's right. But what I have seen from James Lindsay, and look, he's the one who did this. That's why I'm using his name, Cry More James. And but now we see from many others, and we've seen it before from people like Constantine or Colin Wright. And by all means, feel free to respond and call me whatever. I'm not saying this because I'm trying to insult you guys. I'm saying this is how I view you, and this is what I think of your motivations. I see individuals who have desperately tried to maintain some kind of, I'm actually not a conservative, to the point where you're attacking the specter of nothing relevant. I mean, come on, dude. Constantine, LOL, woke right must be mad. Haha. What? These people, bro, you've got 641,000 followers and you're sitting here mocking the editor-in-chief has got 7,000. Again, not to be rude to the American Reformer people, but they're not particularly relevant. Why? What? By all means, guys, looking forward to your takedown of the woke snake charmers, because they've certainly got influence in this country. Okay, fine. How about the flat earthers? You want to do an expose and hoax the flat earthers? By all means, go ahead and do it. And we can make fun of them, but it's not this big own. The woke right is you guys. Anyway, I'll wrap it up there. We got more segments coming up, I guess, because I've been ranting on this one for 40 minutes. So stick around, smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know, and we'll see you all at timcast.com as members. Remember, for $25 a month when you sign up, you can call yourself doctor. I mean, you can call yourself doctor now anyway, but now at least you can say you earned your doctorate from Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. We'll see you all in the next segment.